Welcome back, believers. Today I'll be jumping back in based on the last video where we were talking about our identity in regards to, you can say, gender, etc. I wanted to really use this video to really double down on what gender really looks like, more specifically for the man. I know we often hear the terms men provide or men protect and are strong and all these different things, but I decided to kind of take a different spin on it as far as providing attributes derived from my lived experience, and most importantly derived from the Bible and different men who represented such godly characteristics that I think are more than beneficial to learn from and reference from. So along with, there's plenty of ways that you can kind of go about what a godly man can comprise of, and I'm not any perfect example of that, but I do have a framework in which I use to help me navigate and become more of a godly man each and every day, because it's not just an overnight thing, and it's not a thing that you just arrive to. It's a daily dying to self and a daily surrendering to God, most importantly. But I wanted to also just jump in where I'm going to be sharing what the characteristics are that comprise of a godly man versus what we typically see with a man that's operating from worldly standards or from his own fleshly desires. So I'll jump right in. So with the first one, a godly man's identity consists of surrendering his will. He yields all control, plans, and outcomes to God. This is, I would say, number one, because I know for me, a lot of my life I felt the need to I want to be in control of my destiny, as we may hear in different facets of life, as far as like you can will different things to happening and all these things, but as a believer, that same formula or phrase doesn't really apply, because God essentially is in control of all things and is the creator of all things. So it's very delusional to just think that we have control. We don't even have control if we're gonna wake up or even, live the next, 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever the case is, even though I'm being more, extreme in that, but that can very much be the reality. But in the world, we see how it's a control illusion where we believe being fully in control of one's life will lead to lasting success or fulfillment. So I just wanted to highlight that as the number one, because for me, I constantly found myself just going in this repeated cycle where I thought I was obeying God, but I was really wanting to orchestrate my steps in the way that I thought was best, and that led to a lot of stress, a lot of just anxiety, a lot of disappointment, and just a lot of confusion, amongst many other things. So just surrendering, and a lot of you like, what does that mean or look like? It's just really just dying to yourself and recognizing you don't have the answers, and that's okay. You don't have the blueprint that comprises of the steps that God wants for you, because He reveals that to you over time and when you're ready and willing. So that is important. Excuse me. The next one is having obedient faith. So this is more so just relying on God for clarity and direction while remaining faithful through hardship and delay. Looking back on my life, I would say faith, or even just the word, has been, you could say, my backbone, because just not coming from just an affluent upbringing or I had many resources, etc. Faith became essentially everything to me because I couldn't always see right in front of me or tap into different connections, etc., to make things happen, or even yeah, it's just so many things were out of control. But early on I knew that trusting in God, trusting that no matter what my circumstance looks like and how it feels, that there are greater things ahead. And this also evolves where as you continue to grow in God and grow in your relationship, this continues to elevate. And it's another thing where you never arrive to faith. But I think the obedient part is even more important, because it's one thing just having faith in yourself, or faith in your abilities, or even quote unquote faith in God, but that can very be loose as far as how it's applied. And the obedient part really says that not only I'm gonna have faith, but I'm going to really put my trust in God rather than myself, and understand that obedience is not gonna always feel good, but it's the only way to go that will actually work. And that takes practice, but also just works out for our betterment in the long run. And oftentimes we will see the contrary as far as like how this would play out in the world, looking more so as disobedience, where one relies on listening to self or worldly direction over God's direction. And this could be very destructive and catastrophic because, like I said before, we don't know what's best. You know, we're just kind of just going with the flow of our feelings or our desires, etc., that oftentimes don't lead to long-lasting or true fulfillment. So it's important because it's so easy to call on people that we think we hold in high esteem, or etc., that may not, or most likely is not operating from God being their primary source. So this could just lead to more devastation and just destruction. So it's really important to lean into having that obedient faith so that you can still grow and develop at a substantial rate. And like I mentioned, it says even through the hardships and the delays, yes, God's timing is always different than ours. And the sooner we embrace that, the sooner we'll be liberated just from our own angst, or from our own just ways where things don't work out. So that's important. And then the next one I would say, having a humble spirit, or humility, where it's another word we hear a lot often, but it's really finding worth in God and choosing to decrease ourselves so God may increase. And I love the scripture that coincides with that, where in John 3:30 it says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." This is just a powerful, just simplistic verse, but so complex in actuality, because we oftentimes want to increase ourselves, increase our status, increase our presence, or our power, our significance in an earthly way, versus lowering ourselves to make room for God to work within us. And therefore we're not taking the credit. And I always say too that with my life, my main objective is for when people see me or experience me in whatever way, is that they're not truly seeing me, but they're seeing God in me, and experiencing God through me, versus just seeing me myself. And I'm more so on the introverted side, or for the most part. So I always find this really humorous because it's like, I don't want to really be seen or be in the front of the crowd, or all of those things that most people or just people in general tend to gravitate to wanting. But uh, this really is kind of gave me more just context on like, okay, I'm on the right track as far as, all right, I need to play the background so God can play, the main character. And if it's God's plan to elevate you or to put you in front of many people or a few people, you're not just solely relying on that as far as like your identity and your significance, but you're like just going back to your obedience of knowing like, all right, God, this is what you want, and you're gonna equip me and prepare me for that versus me trying to find status or value in those things. And humility is just also important because a lot of times in life, or even entertainment we see, or movies, social media, or just a lot of things that get highlighted in our culture, it promotes the person being like the main character um, uh, in any context, which I believe we are the main character of our lives in the sense of we're one of one, but to a deeper point is that we don't always have to project that or go out our way to do that. And so it's really important to just know like whatever God has for you will come to you. You don't have to overcompensate or feel like you have to project yourself. Or I hear the phrase like you have to when you go in a room you have to command the room, something like that, which I find just ridiculous because it's like your presence and your essence will speak for itself, and most importantly, the spirit that God puts in you will speak for itself, where you don't have to even do any work regarding that. And what I mean is when you go into any space, your spirit, your demeanor, it will be felt. And a lot of times we don't articulate that, or the people around us don't articulate that, but it's not a matter of them articulating, it's more so of being confident in who you are versus leading with insecurity, with the notion of, oh, I'm gonna command the room, which oftentimes that's where that comes from. We will also see this in the world as just people using like a performance identity where they tie their value to status or money, titles, achievements, affiliations, and even work ethic. This is plaguing our society at a rapid rate and has plagued even my life to a certain degree. And thankfully God has continued to be graceful and has given me awareness to see that, because a lot of times I always was out to like try to prove myself or just prove people wrong, and that usually comes from an unfulfilled place and a place where it constantly has us on a cycle of just trying to compete versus being authentic, having us just really chasing these vanity metrics to fulfill us, which in the end it really never does, and nothing ever becomes enough, and it becomes kind of this mechanism that separates us from our true selves and even most importantly from God. So it's like not saying having these things are like, again, inherently wrong, but truly idolizing these things or putting these things first before God really leads to a destructive place. So it's just food for thought to keep in mind. And next, I would say, is the fear of the Lord. We live in today's society that, it's like we've completely shied away from the fear of the Lord, in a sense of we don't have the reverence for God and the reverence for His virtues and the things He wants us to do and live by in the world. And I think it's because of just ignorance and also just leaning into just ourselves. But fear of the Lord is really just prioritizing God's authority and truth over human approval. And it's so like convenient to not have the fear of the Lord, because to be a believer, it comes at a cost. You have to pay a price, but it's a worthy price that uh, allows us to have an opportunity at everlasting life, where we're with God. We're with God, uh, in any moment of time. And yeah, it's not advantageous here on earth to a degree, because you might not get promotions, you might not get uh, just all the earthly pleasures that you want. And this also comes in the form of like a survival compromise, where in the world we're like, oh, we're just all just trying to survive and we just got to get by. So, we rationalize not obeying God or having reverence for God, because we're like, man, God will understand. But if you have the awareness and the conviction, you understand that prioritizing human approval or personal safety along with earthly pleasures, those things will lead you away from God and lead you into more of a lukewarm and a life that, yeah, just doesn't have God at the helm, because you've conditioned yourself to want to take the easy route and the route that feels good, but in the end it backfires for those who believe in God. And I have a verse for that as well. Galatians 1:10, for I am now seeking the approval of man or of God, or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. So it's choosing God over the world, choosing God over our flesh, and there's no in between. And that's still a work in progress even in my life, because every day I have to evaluate my decisions to understand and take heed to that. So it's a process. And next, or lastly, I have a few more. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's just a list of things. But integrity of character. Integrity of character is, man that live, and I want to also add, these can also apply to women as well. But for me, I'm more familiar with, what manhood looks like within the kingdom and in life. So the next one, yeah, integrity of character, lives an honest life in public and in private, grounded in kingdom morals, truth, and integrity. This is also a major one, because nowadays, yeah, you don't see, I can speak for myself, I don't see a lot of people just with operating from, more so like in business realms or major institutions. I don't see people operating with principles and even ethics, etc. Even online, just with the content creators or social media people or entertainers, etc. It's like everything nowadays seems like it has a dollar sign or a price, which can compromise everything as far as like values. But just understanding that your character and integrity, that follows you more than money could ever, or any other position. So just knowing that having a strong character and integrity basis of how you do things, and not just from your own personal take, but deriving integrity and character from the Bible, of how God is showing us through various characters and various ways of being, how we should live. So really being conscious of that and start to take note of that, of like, what are the things that God finds virtuous and ethical, and compare them to yours, and then go to God again to show, like, and all these things is like not an overnight thing, but asking God to help you and intercede on your behalf of how can I establish, God given integrity and character, so that I can display that in the world, so that I can have a more fulfilling and righteous life. Because on the contrary, we see the lack of character and integrity coming in the form of folks being unethical. And I say even myself, I haven't always been on the path of straight and narrow continuously, because even growing up, I would find myself, just one of my brother's friends kind of introduced me to like the idea of just stealing for the sake of it, small things from the gas station and stuff like that, which kind of led to and then didn't have really money to buy different things for my sports team, stuff like that. So I was like, all right, I can kind of steal. And then I was under like 16 or whatever, and I was like, all right, so if I got caught, I won't go to jail. But it ended up catching back up to me, where I ended up getting stolen from. And that's just one, small example, but I learned through that I have to, set a standard of being honorable, and even with the small things, not stealing and not lying and all those things, because it catches up with you, and when it does, it really bites and backfires and sets you back. And not like you can't be redeemed, but it's just better to know that if you can do things the right way the first time, or initially, it'll save you heartache and headache, in the long run. And yeah, so it looks like, in the world, we see more of folks that operate from dishonesty or sinful behavior, corruption, or even hidden compromise. So no matter how sweet it may seem or look or be, you don't want to compromise, and there's people, you don't want to do backdoor type of deals, or you don't want to lower your standards just to make a dollar, or even to just get earthly pleasures. So just keep that in mind, because it'll be so easy you can basically sell yourself out, doing that. We often look at like, celebrity selling their soul. Is like, no, you can sell your soul by just being unethical, by compromising the values that God has already given to us, and that is really more catastrophic than anything. So just keep that in mind, and know it's God will provide for you. He will make a way, even when you might think like, this is my only option, this is my big ticket. Just keep in mind, it's like, if it's too good to be true, or if it comes at a cost that goes against the word, not only walk away from it, but run away from it, because that is tampering your spirit, each and every time you do that. And then next, I would say servant leadership. Servant leadership leads, a man that operates within servant leadership leads his family, community, and others through sacrifice, responsibility, and selfless dedication. And contrary, those who don't operate with servant leadership operate from self-serving leadership, where they seek power or control or recognition or influence to benefit themselves rather than to serve others. I'm really keen on this because I had a friend and mentor who taught me like, those who serve lead, when I was in college, and that always stood out to me, because I thought leadership was just really being out front or having the power to do something, but it showed, like, even going back to Christ being the ultimate example of manhood as far as how he lived, how he served everywhere he went. And serving not only just looks one way, but it could be a lot of different ways, where you could be, for instance, I had recently went back home and just started helping clean, or recently went back to my mom's home and just started helping out with just cleaning and doing different things like that, which kind of struck me by surprise, because I didn't have like a premeditated notion to do that. But God leading me, I just started to lead through demonstrating and serving and cleaning bathrooms and all that stuff, which actually felt fulfilling after I had did that, because it was like, wow, I'm leading by example, and I'm not only telling orders or whatever the case is, but I'm actually doing the work of cleaning and manually, demonstrating those services. And that's just one example, but servant leadership is important because a lot of times we think people are not watching, but they are watching. They're watching those small things that we do. They're watching how we open doors for women, or even for men, that just to extend a kind gesture, or even if it's just giving the last piece of something to someone because that's the courteous thing to do. Or just find, there's so many examples of being a servant leader, and it's not just barking orders, but it's like, how can you demonstrate being a servant, which doesn't always feel good, or it's not always convenient, but it's rewarding and leaves a lasting impact that really makes a difference. Like I mentioned, for our communities and our families, because a lot of times, even I've noticed, I'm not a parent yet, but I've noticed too, parents like to bark orders, or they tell their kids something, but they're not actually doing it themselves. And that's where you find that the inadequacy of the two, where the kid is like, I'm looking at what you're doing versus what you're telling me, and that creates just a lot of frustration. But once we lead by example, and be alongside others with ever the given endeavor, or how we ever can meet the demand, that truly makes an empowering difference. And then next, seeks accountability. This is huge as well, where men who seek accountability pursues purity, growth, obedience, and wise counsel, and godly community. I think this has been one of the main things that has been kind of the destruction of the current man in today's society, because we want to deal with it by ourselves and alone, and we feel just scared or fearful to share with others, and we just keep it in a closet. And we feel like we have to also keep the persona of strength, outward strength, where that in itself is a misconception, because strength is not it's not an aesthetic or appearance, but it's more of a strength as a being, and of recognizing that you might not get everything right, but how do you handle that, and how do you make improvements, and how do you continue to persevere and grow regardless of kind of what happens to you in that moment. So, man, I encourage you, and even for myself, it took me many years. I had wrestled just with pornography, where and I could say 16 years of just wrestling with it since being a kid, and now being delivered. It's still, that was an adjustment, because I felt ashamed to just share that with others, or even people that I was close to, because I just felt convicted, and felt felt like my lower self doing that, and just didn't know how to go about it. But the more I started to reveal that to trusted people around me, and to God, most importantly, God started to work on me in a rapid rate, and started to really just remove those desires and the perversion, that came along that. But that also connected to just my outlook. My energy was always off, and different things like that, and I felt like I couldn't operate my full presence because of those things. So it's like, really, man, I encourage you to seek help in this area, because it's gonna bleed into a lot of different areas if you don't really get that accountability of. And it doesn't have to be just that, it could be whatever area where you're falling short, or you can improve on. And on the opposite, yeah, I would engage in destructive isolation to deal with it, where we see this often happening, where we are trying to protect our ego or our comfort or self-reliance and overall delusion. And I would say that's important because I think delusion has been an epidemic as a society, where we don't really realize kind of what we're doing, but we're just kind of just going with it and justifying it, and it just continues to perpetuate the behavior. So really just praying, God, asking, like, God, reveal the truth to me, remove the delusion that I may be operating with, and help me truly be delivered and healed from this, and bring others into my life to help me as well. And God would surely show up to meet that demand for you. The next, and this will be the last one. I know this was kind of long. I wanted to keep this video short, but yeah, and I could make part 2, part 3, part 4, and beyond with these tools, because it's so much information here. But I try to condense it down for you guys. But lastly, I would say prioritizes health, which I define stewards his body, mind, and habits with discipline, recognizing them as tools for purpose and service. While on the contrary, those of the world neglect health. They ignore physical, mental, or spiritual well-being, and indulges in perversion and disregards purity. This also kind of coincides with accountability, but more so just it's so easy now to, like, with different working from home structures, or just with the chaos that we are at in the world, it's so easy to cope with just neglecting our bodies, and even the hypersexual culture we live in. It's so easy to either overeat or just engage in the worldly vices that just disrupt our health, disrupt our temple. And we often just think of honoring God through attendance of church or etc. But one of the major commands is to honor God through our temple that He's given us to house the Spirit within us, and everything else flows from that. So if you're not prioritizing your health and eating healthy, eating right, exercising, and me, this has been also adjustment too, because being an athlete most of my life, and then transitioning more so to after college and working in the corporate world and etc. I have neglected being active, every day or 3 or 4 times a day, just because the schedule feels like it doesn't allow. But every day, I began to get just more conscious of, like, all right, when I walk or do these small things, exercise, it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It's just 30 minutes a day or something to really just protect your mind. And even outside of just physical exercises, really reading your word, praying and meditating on the scriptures, that's also important. And having a healthy community of people around you to help just encourage and empower you. These are all things that correlate to your health, that really make a difference in the long run. But I think I'll just wrap it here. I know I could make a part 2 of this for sure, because I've had some other stuff that I wanted to talk about. But I just thank you guys for tuning in. And if you guys have any other topics of interest or things that you want me to cover in this series or in other categories, I'll definitely take note of it and try my best to bring you guys some videos and content to help you in that regard. But I thank you guys again, and until next time, peace.